The wind that blows through the Yarmouk Valley today carries no sound except the friction of dry grass and stones worn down by time. Yet almost 14 centuries ago, it was here that the earth trembled beneath the steps of thousands of soldiers. Dust rose high into the sky of al-Sham, and history, silent as ever, recorded a great shift in the balance of the world. Yarmouk was not merely a battle. It was the meeting point of two currents of history. To understand its meaning, we must return to the world of the 7th century. That world was in a fragile state. The Byzantine and Persian empires had spent decades in exhausting warfare. Major cities in al-Sham and Anatolia suffered devastation. Taxes were raised to finance the wars. Ordinary people were weighed down. Emperor Heraclius managed to drive back the Persians and recover parts of his territory. In Byzantine historical records, he is portrayed as a leader who saved the empire. But that victory came at a steep price. The army was worn out, resources were depleted, loyalty in several regions began to fracture. Al-Sham remained a vital region. It was the gateway to Egypt, the Byzantine Empire's main granary. It was also home to key cities, such as Damascus and Hims. Economically and strategically, losing al-Sham meant weakening the heart of the empire. Meanwhile, in the Arabian Peninsula, a profound transformation was underway after the passing of the Messenger of Allah in 11 AH. The Muslim community faced a trial that shook internal stability. Some tribes refused to pay zakat. Others followed self-proclaimed false prophets. Caliph Abu Bakr as-Siddiq R.A. confronted that crisis with extraordinary resolve. In authentic narrations, it is reported that he declared he would fight anyone who separated prayer from zakat. This stance was not merely a political decision. It was a commitment to preserve the foundations of faith. The Ridda Wars restored unity across the Arabian Peninsula. The internal threat was subdued. After that, attention shifted outward. The expeditions into al-Sham were not an impulsive decision. Islamic history records that contact with northern powers had already occurred during the Prophet's lifetime. The Battle of Mu'tah in 8 AH marked an early confrontation with forces affiliated with Byzantium. The expedition of the book in 9 AH demonstrated readiness to face threats from the north, even though no direct battle took place. Against that backdrop, the dispatch of forces into al-Sham during Abu Bakr's R.A. Caliphate carried strategic and preventive dimensions. Several commanders were appointed to lead separate expeditions. Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah R.A., one of the companions known as a trustworthy one of this ummah, Amr ibn al-Az R.A., renowned for intelligence and sharp strategy, and Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan R.A., and Shurbil ibn Azana R.A., also led key sectors. But when these movements were detected by the Byzantines, the response was severe. Heraclius did not want to lose al-Sham without a major fight. Mobilization began. Troops were gathered from various regions. Some classical reports, such as those of al-Tabari and al-Baldiri, mention an enormous Byzantine force. However, these figures vary from one source to another. Precise numbers cannot be fully confirmed in the earliest materials. What is clear is that, in general, Byzantium held a significant advantage in manpower and heavy equipment. In the midst of this situation, Khalid ibn al-Walid R.A. was summoned from the Iraqi front. He had led Muslim forces in confrontations against Persia. His transfer from Iraq to al-Sham via Desert Route became one of the most famous military maneuvers in Islamic history. His arrival did not replace Abu Ubaidah R.A. as the highest administrative leader, but in practical battlefield terms. Khalid was entrusted with directing military strategy because of his experience. Here, the leadership character of the generation of the companions becomes clear. There was no personal ambition, no struggle for position, only the aim of safeguarding trust and upholding justice. The Muslim forces then concentrated in the Yarmouk Valley. This region lies in hilly terrain with deep ravines and a river gorge. Geographically, it was dangerous ground for a large army if it became trapped and forced back. The choice of terrain was not accidental. In military history, selecting the battlefield often determines the outcome before a sword is even raised. On the other side, Byzantium assembled a massive force. They had heavy cavalry, trained infantry, and long combat experience. Here, two worlds confronted each other. Yet Yarmouk was not only about physical strength, it was also about spiritual condition. The Quran lays down a core principle of victory in Surah Al-Anfal 8:45. "O you who believe, when you meet a force, stand firm and remember Allah much, that you may be successful." This verse is not merely ritual advice. It is guidance for meeting overwhelming pressure. The days before a battle were filled with tension. Each side watched the other. Minor maneuvers occurred. Psychological pressure intensified. The Byzantines hoped their numerical advantage would break Muslim morale. They were accustomed to facing the large armies of Persia. Confronting a new force from the Arabian Peninsula may have seemed like another challenge they could overcome. But history often moves beyond human expectation. When the battle began, pressure came from multiple directions. Byzantine heavy cavalry attempted to break the lines. Their infantry advanced in disciplined formation. Some reports mention that parts of the Muslim army were pushed back close to the camp. This shows that victory did not come without severe trials. It was in such critical moments that steadfast faith was tested. Allah commands believers in Surah Al-Imran 3:200 to be patient, to strengthen one another in patience, and to remain vigilant. That principle became real on the field of Yarmouk. Khalid ibn al-Walid R.A. organized a reserve cavalry unit capable of rapid movement to vulnerable points. Whenever pressure increased in one sector, he shifted forces to seal the gap. Mobility became a decisive factor. The first day passed under intense strain. The second day brought even greater pressure. Both armies tested each other's endurance. There was no instant victory, no spectacular visual miracle. What existed was discipline, patience, and tactically sound decisions. And slowly, momentum began to change. But how exactly did that shift happen? How could the massive structure of the Byzantine army begin to falter? That is what we will explore in the next section, when Yarmouk entered its most decisive phase in its history. The desert wind blew fiercely through the Valley of Yarmouk. Dust swirled into the air, veiling the sky in a grayish hue. Before the Muslims stood the massive army of the Byzantine Empire, an empire centuries old, one that had once ruled across 3 continents. Yet in that valley, history was no longer determined by the age of power. It was determined by steadfast hearts. Consolidation of command. At first, the Muslim forces were led by several separate commanders, but to face the overwhelming Byzantine strength, the command was consolidated under Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah. He was known for his gentleness, ascetic devotion, and deep trustworthiness. However, in a moment of crisis, military strategy demanded firmness and speed. Therefore, upon consideration by the Caliph of Medina, field command was entrusted to Khalid ibn al-Walid. This was not merely a technical military decision. It was a lesson in Islamic leadership. That leadership is not about personal honor. It is a trust carried for the welfare of the Ummah. Abu Ubaidah accepted the decision without protest, without wounded pride, without hidden ambition. Here lay the spiritual strength of the Muslim army. Their hearts were united. Khalid's strategy, facing a giant. The Byzantine forces were led by seasoned generals under Emperor Heraclius. Their numbers were far greater, composed of heavy infantry, armored cavalry, and allied troops from various regions. Khalid understood one thing clearly. If the Muslims fought a long frontal battle, they would be worn down and encircled. So he divided his army into several corps, supported by a fast-moving reserve, a mobile guard, capable of reinforcing any weakening point. This was a remarkable tactical innovation for its time. He made use of the mobility of light cavalry, the discipline of the battle lines, coordination between the wings, targeted counterattacks. But strategy alone was not enough. He also planted spiritual resolve. He reminded the soldiers of Allah's verses, of patience for the hereafter
our soldiers.
On that battlefield.
Grant them
This world
victory
and the
and
next stood
patience.
side by side.
You are
Day
the hearer
one,
of all
test of the mind.
prayers.
The first Byzantine assault came with full force. Wave after wave slammed into the Muslim ranks. Some flanks were briefly pushed back. Dust, cries, the clash of steel and blood soaked the soil of al-Sham. Here came a moment that stirred the heart. Muslim women positioned behind the lines strengthened the soldiers' resolve. They did not fight on the front line, but they urged the warriors not to retreat from jihad. the army's morale rose again. The first day ended without absolute victory, but the Muslims remained standing, and that itself was an early victory. Days 2 and 3, a war of endurance. The battle continued with intense pressure. The Byzantines tried to use their numbers to surround the Muslims. Khalid responded with rapid maneuvers. He shifted troops from relatively secure sectors to rescue threatened ones. Speed was his weapon, but more than that, calmness was his strength. In the midst of chaos, he continued to think clearly. He understood that this war was not merely a contest for territory. It was a test of faith and steadfastness for the generation of the companions. At night, the Muslim soldiers did not feast or relax. They rose for prayer. They supplicated. Imagine the contrast. On one side, an imperial army with magnificent equipment. On the other, the companions in simple clothing prostrating on the sand. Which was stronger? History answered that question days later. Day 4, the turning point. The fourth day became critical. The Byzantines launched a major assault to break the Muslims' left wing. If that flank collapsed, the entire army would split apart. Khalid made a bold decision. He gathered the cavalry into one concentrated force, then counterattacked the Byzantine cavalry side. The strike was fast, coordinated, and shattered the enemy's balance. For the first time, the Byzantine army began to lose cohesion. This was not merely a tactical success. It was a moment when fear changed sides. Day 5, the wind that changed history. Classical reports mention that in the final days, strong winds blew toward the faces of the Byzantine troops. Dust disrupted their sight. For believers, natural events are not mere coincidences. They unfold within the Son of Tullah, Allah's patterns in creation. The Quran reminds us that Allah's help sometimes comes in unexpected ways, but it must be emphasized. The wind did not replace effort. The Muslims had fought for 5 full days. They had bled. They had endured. They had planned. Help comes to those who strive. Day 6, the collapse of an empire's hope. On the 6th day, the Byzantine defensive structure began to collapse. Their cavalry scattered. Communication between units broke down. Morale fell. The Muslim forces seized momentum. The final assault was launched. Many Byzantine soldiers were pushed toward the ravines and the river Yarmouk. Defeat turned into panic. In that valley, the history of power in al-Sham changed forever. The Battle of Yarmouk became a major turning point in world history. Geopolitical impact, more than a battlefield. This was not an ordinary defeat. It broke Byzantine dominance over al-Sham. Major regions such as Damascus, Hims, and later Jerusalem opened to Islamic governance. But even more significant was a shift in the very paradigm of power. Islam was no longer a small community in the Arabian Peninsula. It had become a civilizational force. A few years later, under the leadership of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the administration of al-Sham was built upon principles of justice, protection for non-Muslims, and relatively stable governance. Yarmouk did not merely destroy an army. It opened the door to a new model of rule, a reflection of faith. Why Yarmouk matters to us. What is the greatest lesson? That the strength of the Ummah does not lie in numbers, not in grandeur, not in a long imperial legacy, but in unity of hearts, trustworthy leadership, sound strategy, and true tawakkul, reliance upon Allah. Yarmouk teaches that faith is not passive. It works. It thinks. It plans. It strives. And when maximal effort meets sincerity of heart, that is where Allah's help descends.